Hello, good afternoon. I'm Rachel Patton, Executive Director of Preserve Arkansas. Preserve Arkansas is the statewide nonprofit advocate for historic preservation. Welcome to Women in Preservation, our series that features women who are working to save historic places. I want to thank our series sponsor, DMX Architecture of Fayetteville, for their generous support of women in preservation. Many of you are already members of Preserve Arkansas, and we thank you for your support. If you're not already a member, I would like to invite you to formally join us. And your membership is so important to the work that we do to save Arkansas's historic places. Memberships may be paid monthly or annually and include a host of benefits like t-shirts, stickers, and more. You can learn more about membership and join at preservearkansas.org. You're all invited to join us on this year's Preservation Ramble, which is a bus trip. If you're not familiar with the Ramble, I encourage you to look it up on our website to find out more about the Ramble. But the theme for this year is Rambling the Ozarks, Twin Groves to Gilbert. This year's trip will travel US Highway 65 from the foothills of the Ozarks all the way up to the Buffalo National River. Learn more and get tickets at preservearkansas.org. Be sure to join us for Women in Preservation next month on November the 11th. We'll feature Jackie Wolven, who is Executive Director of Main Street Eureka Springs. And now it's my pleasure to introduce today's speaker, Dr. Juliet Morrow. Dr. Morrow joined the Arkansas Archaeological Survey in 1997. Her doctoral dissertation at Washington University summarized the evidence for the peopling of the Americas and focused on the technology and mobility of Clovis and related fluted point makers. She has directed investigations of dozens of sites in the Midwest and Mid-South, including large-scale excavations at the Martins Clovis Camp in St. Louis County, Missouri, the late Mississippian Greenbrier town near Batesville, Arkansas, and the National Geographic-funded King Mastodon site in Jonesboro, Arkansas. With assistance from colleagues, students, volunteers, and the Arkansas Archaeological Society, she's investigated and preserved many significant places, including historic and modern cemeteries throughout Northeast Arkansas. In 2006, she edited Paleo-Indian Archaeology by the University of Florida Press. Her specialties include lithic technology, archaeozoology, pedology, and site formation processes. She currently teaches archaeology and anthropology at Arkansas State University in Jonesboro. Please welcome Dr. Morrow.
Thank you, Rachel.
You're welcome. I can see you and hear you.
Okay, so I wanted to go through just the timeline of the 13,500 years we know about in the state of Arkansas. Just in case people aren't familiar with all the different technological changes and cultural changes that happen throughout that long time period. I have been, let's see, I'm trying to get this to go forward. There it goes. I've been with the survey. Yeah.
Julie, you need to share your screen over mine. We can't see your slides.
Okay, hang on just a second. I'm gonna go up here.
I'll tell you whenever I see them.
Okay, I'm gonna have to escape this to be able to do that. Okay, I see what you're saying. Okay. Make this large. Can you see it now?
Not yet.
Okay,
Here we go.
how about now? Okay.
Yes, and it wants you
Okay.
to make it full screen or make it. There you
It
go.
should
Okay,
be.
looks great.
It should be. Okay. So the survey the Arkansas Archaeological Survey was started in 1967. I came here when Dr. Dan Morris retired in 1997, and I had just finished my doctoral dissertation in 96, so I was extremely happy to have a position that was not just an academic position. There's only 5 station archaeologists who also teach 2 courses a year, and I'm one of them. We're a part of the U of A system, but we're kind of special because we sit out there and we're kind of separate from the universities. U of A's universities spread all over. They don't all have archaeologists. What we try to do with this survey is not only preserve information by excavating it, but we also study collections of things that have been excavated not only by us, but sometimes other institutions or by people who have accidentally found things and dug them up themselves. So we do all kinds of research primarily, and then we disseminate our knowledge from researching to the public. We do this in the form of writing books, giving public talks like this one, and also publishing articles in journals and things like that. This is the timeline. I'm going to go over it really quickly, and this is being taped, so you can always review it. If I go too fast, you can ask me questions at the end. But we have, this is very old and out of date, but we have a lot of different changes going on. The 2 main vertical lines here are separating people who hunted and gathered primarily, megafauna, things that are extinct today like mammoth and bison and horse. And then the environment changes drastically, and you have this long period between about 8,000 years ago, 9,000 years ago, roughly, up until the time of Christ. And then you've got pottery developing just prior to that. And so the lifestyle that people had for the last couple thousand years is extremely different from what people were doing for many, many thousands of years, because now they are settling down. So one of the things I study is settlement mobility. And to do that, you have to know about the resources in the state of Arkansas if you want to learn about where people were, because they moved things around. So one of the things I like to do is study rocks. Rocks don't move. People move rocks. I highlighted cemeteries in this slide because it's an area that I really love. I love cemeteries of all ages. So I'm not going to dwell on all the other things, but as I go through the slides, I'll mention things about how people lived that are a little different from the people that came before them. So we know people entered North America right around 14,000 to 15,000 years ago. We have no evidence of them being here in Arkansas that early, but we know they get here by 13,500 years ago. I'm very interested in spirituality and religion, and so my whole trajectory through anthropology and archaeology has led me to try to understand what can we know about people's worldview, their spirituality, how they see themselves in the universe from material culture. It's a very difficult thing because, we don't know how they thought. We can't really excavate intention or things like that. but I think we can get sort of close to it. So I'll leave that topic for the time being to just tell you that there's a lot of climatic changes that happen. By the time people are here, there's already massive amounts of meltwater coming down the Mississippi River and large ice sheets that are starting to melt. This is the land bridge people came over to get into uh, the New World. And the lighter color on the picture on the right shows the land that would have been available to walk across, to live on. Animals are going back and forth. People are going back and forth. This is a very um, alive area. It wasn't difficult to live there. We know people are living there for quite a while. There is a corridor that opens up, and there's also lots of ice melting in the Rocky Mountains in Canada that people could have traversed through, uh, and we know they did. There's lots of speculation about corridors and routes people would have taken to get into North America. We know now that the ice-free corridor or the icy corridor, we really refer to it as the icy corridor now because there are a lot of lakes to traverse. There's a lot of problems they had to solve to get around this area. It didn't look all that different than some of the places in Alaska look today. The ice-free corridor, the icy corridor, that some of these glaciers were a mile thick. This one is not that thick, but it gives you a sense of what the climate was like back then. It was about 5 degrees cooler, 5 degrees Celsius cooler. There's a lot of animals running around that we don't have anymore. Horse and an animal called Cervalces. If you look on the right, there's an animal that looks kind of in between a moose and an elk. We have a few specimens from Arkansas that are extremely famous from that species. And of course, there's bison, lots of different forms of bison and other small animals that are gone today. They just didn't make it through that climatic episode, and also they didn't make it because people are hunting them. So when we get south of the ice sheets, an amazing thing happens, and that is elk. Elk come along with humans and they get into the lower 48 states, what we have now. And the earliest elk we know of is at a very famous Paleo-Indian site called Anzac. And so down in the lower right-hand corner of the screen, there are some tools from that site that are made of elk. The way that those tools worked is shown in this. It's a picture of a Clovis point. It's attached to a piece of wood. And this is an experimental example. But these elk antler foreshafts are what they used at that time. So elk kind of follow humans down this corridor to populate the entire, not only North America, but South America as well. There's a large repertoire of other tools that these people used, but the most easily recognizable tool is the Clovis point. And these points are found all over. We did some research last fall that shows that they are eating meat. Isotopic studies were conducted by a team of people that I was part of. These are all of the various sites that we sampled in order to understand what their diet was 13,000 to 13,500 years ago. So from these sites, animal remains were studied, and then we compared them to uh, human remains that were long ago excavated and studied. These two foreshafts that had points on them at one time were from a burial site, the oldest burial in Western Hemisphere, oldest burial in North America. That's a formal burial where somebody was buried. It was a child. He was buried with 100 stone tools and 15 fragments of these foreshafts, these elk foreshafts. So these are the radiocarbon dates, and they're actually 2,000 years older than the radiocarbon dates because back then the climate was different. And so you've got to account for the differences in the carbon cycle, which is way too complicated to go into right now. But what we learned is that the Anzac mother, the mother of the baby, who was about a 1-year-old infant boy, buried with this regalia of the tribe. So we don't know who they are related to today, other than you could go down to Mexico and probably anybody that's originally from Mexico is got a lot of DNA from this particular infant boy in their DNA. So this is the mother. We had to do some reverse engineer work to figure out where she would be dietary wise in relation to all the other animals of the day. So using isotopic information, she's really close to short-faced bear and Homotherium, which is a scimitar cat. And you can read about all this. It's in a study that was published in Science Advances, December 5th, 2025. We have a lot of evidence of these people in Arkansas, but it's all from the surface. Unfortunately, we haven't found a site that's buried yet. And these are some of the sites that we know about. Up until about 2018, we had 105 actual projectile points that we could type as Clovis in a database, and they come from 53 known sites. So there are multiple points from some of these sites. One of the things about archaeology that is kind of a paradox is that we have a lot of information from stone tools, but we don't have a lot of information from the majority of their material culture. So the stone tools are, 1% of the volume probably of what the totality of their material culture was. There is so much that they had in their repertoire, just like we have a lot of stuff, they had a lot of stuff. Their stuff was all organic. It doesn't survive in the archaeological record unless it's really well preserved in, say, a rock shelter or a cave that's dry or a bog that has no oxygen. And there are places like that, but they're few and far between. So we're very concerned with preserving places that have these perishable materials because they allow us to more fully understand how tools were hefted, how they carried things around in bags that are woven out of organic materials, out of leather, parfleches, as they're called in the West. So all of this is what's kind of missing. And when we have these earlier cultures like Clovis, and I'm going to talk about Dalton in a minute, these very early cultures that we know something about, we don't really know much except for what we can glean from the stone tools themselves. So the stone tools are extremely important. We can get residues off of them. We can learn um, what they're using them on. Not only that, but also how they're using them, whether they're scraping or whittling or using them as a knife or a projectile point or prying something open. So the fracture patterns on the tools are also very important. So this Dalton culture happens to be the next sort of technological innovation because they realize that they can start chopping wood, right? They make a tool, the forest has taken over. Before that time, it's all pretty much open parkland. And then as the boreal forest takes over, these people have to figure out how do we make a living. So they start making a tool called an adze. I'm going to show you an adze in a second. They don't have any more megafauna. They have deer, elk, all kinds of small mammals, fish. They are probably a lot like the people before them, these Clovis folks, but they're not roaming around quite as far. They're more locally tied, and the population has exploded. So for every one or two Clovis points that I see in the archaeological record, there are thousands and thousands of Dalton points. People collect them, and this is a time period that is of great interest to anybody living in the Mississippi Valley. These people, their technology is spread from New Jersey all the way over to Colorado, from Minnesota all the way down to Louisiana. So they have this leaf-shaped point that is very beautiful, aesthetically pleasing. Sometimes they're serrated. They're mostly using them as knives and spear points. And they get resharpened. And when they resharpen them, sometimes they're using them to bore holes into things. And so we call those another type of tool, a perforator. This is a timeline we made years ago, like 2018, 2017, of points in Arkansas. The image on the right is from a site in Missouri that gives us the post-Dalton timeline of spear point morphology. The way they're shaped tells us how old they are. But on the left, those are all very early points, all the way up to Dalton and other cultures that are contemporary with Dalton. This point up here, and this one, these are called San Patrice points. They're very different. It's a completely different culture that emerges right toward the end of the Dalton era, around 12,200, 12,300 years ago. So that just gives you a sense of how we use these uh, differently shaped artifacts as timekeepers. They're kind of like index fossils. So Dalton refers to both an archaeological culture and a point type. Their toolkit looks like this. It's amazing because they have these wood chopping tools, and they are, we call them adzes because they're flat on the bottom and they're round on the top. They were hafted, and they start whittling wood with them, chopping trees down with them. I'm not going to go through all the other tools. If you get interested, you can look on the Arkansas Encyclopedia's website. There's a few articles about the Dalton people, but you can see how they whittle these Dalton points down so that they can then poke through leather with them. They're not drills. They don't have rotary use wear on them. They're using them to actually poke holes in things to sew. The North American rainfall map corresponds almost exactly to the Dalton heartland. So that blue circle in the middle is the Dalton heartland. It's in Missouri and Arkansas. And We know they have different kinds of sites because we find different kinds of tools at different kinds of sites. They have sites where all those tools occur in abundance. There's sites where only a few tool types occur, and those look kind of like camps where people are just doing one activity. There's cemeteries. This is a cemetery called Sloan. It's very famous. It's the oldest known formal open air cemetery in the entire Western Hemisphere. It was excavated in 1974 by Dr. Dan Morris and a team of students and helpers from Arkansas State University. This is a view looking from the site toward Crowley's Ridge, which is, of course, a landform region that divides two large sort of trenches that were filled in by sediment. So this is a high spot, and people buried their dead at this spot, they think. Not everybody agrees that it's a cemetery, but Dr. Morse interpreted it as such. And you see him here with one of his students, or one of his employees, actually, Michael Millian, who is measuring. And because they took provenience, 3D measurements on every single tool, everything that they found at this site, we were able to reconstruct the spatial patterning of what's going on here in a three-dimensional way. It's very important. So these are the 439 tools that they mapped in this diagram. He's written a Smithsonian Institution Press book that you can buy and learn all about what was found at the Sloan site. Of course, these are all historic photographs from our archives. And this is one of the Dalton points. People were buried with these. That's Dr. Morse's interpretation. There are piles of what we call bifaces. These are not going to be turned into Dalton points. These are other kinds of things. They're not finished tools. They're perhaps going to be turned into some kind of tool, but not the projectile points. These are shaft abraders for making spear shafts. This shows you a few of the tools from the actual site, side by side with a map showing the three known sites that Dr. Morse investigated. The one on the northernmost portion of the map that's a black dot is the Sloan site. It's not very far from ASU. The Arkansas Archaeological or the Archaeological Conservancy bought it, and they own it, and they protect that site. The other two dots are the Brand site and the Lace site, and they're down on the Langee River, and they represent probably camps that are related to a group of people that traversed this area. So this is kind of their homeland, and that's the cemetery where they were reportedly burying their dead. So one of the ideas about things is that things have power, and people are buried with certain things. And one of the ideas is they're bundling these things together, and they're burying bundles of things with people. And it's not the things necessarily that they use. Some of it could have been their personal equipment. It also could have been things people were making at the site. One of Dr. Morse's ideas was they could have been going there to actually make things, having a funerary celebration, and then putting things into burial context. There's not a lot of overlap. So one idea about the Sloan site is that they may have had a way of marking the graves that no longer exists today for us. So very, very important site. We've learned a lot about it, but there's much more that can be learned about this culture. These are their rocks. So all the rocks that they're using are located within the area of the Western Lowlands and the Ozarks. This is the Sloan site here. These are all the different rock formations of the Ozarks. The Ozarks is comprised of a dome, and as that dome eroded, many, many different kinds of rocks are exposed. And by knowing how to identify the different types of rocks, we can know where people were going to get them. So some of the rocks that they're using to make those big spear points are coming from way over in this area. And so it's very telling how far they're going to get these materials. Here are some more. Some of them suggest they were on spears when they were buried with people. Here's two side by side. And then these are just a few of the early archaic sites that are post-Dalton. So after the Dalton people, there's a whole series of cultures that we can tell how old they are based on the shape of their spear points and their knives. Some of these are spear points, the narrower ones, and some of them are knives. So these might be women's tools, and some of the spear points may be men's tools. And the spear points actually can be used as knives in the field as well. We recently documented a huge collection of materials from a rock shelter. A gentleman in this region of Independence County loaned us his collection to study and to be able to compare with many of the other collections at Arkansas State University that the survey has, the museum has, and then other private collections that we've been studying over the last 30 years. The middle and late archaic period is a big void. We don't really know what's going on during that time period. Here in Northeast Arkansas, we know they are doing a lot of plant experimentation, and they're probably growing plants, but we only have a few sites where we have good samples of excavated material. So we're always looking for these kinds of sites to excavate more the way we would do it today, not 50 years ago or 30 years ago or 20 years ago, because the way we excavate today is much different than the way things were excavated in the past. We use different techniques. So they're not a lot different than the Dalton people, but all these middle and late archaic folks are getting more into plant cultivation. The earliest plant they have are these naturally occurring gourds. And they are used in lots of ways. They're net weights, they're water bottles, they're eating utensils. They could be using them as ladles or dippers, funnels, bowls, musical instruments like drums and rattles. And the way these spread probably early on, thousands of years before they're cultivating them, is through mechanisms of cultural transmission, like, well, somebody decides they like somebody over here and they're going to get married. They take their material culture and they go over there. There's a lot of mixture of people from area to area. People do not, they're just like us today. They didn't just stay in one place. They moved around and they formed alliances that are extremely valuable, because to marry out, to have exogamous marriage, would have benefited them genetically. So, pushing back what we know about people today into this more remote time period, 8,000 years ago, we know there's probably formal territories within which people are living, but they're also communicating with each other in various ways. So this time period, we don't have a lot of Middle Archaic sites we have none that are really fully excavated. We have samples from some late archaic sites in northeast Arkansas. This is kind of the area that my 18, 17 counties that I'm mostly in. But we do know a lot about their patterns of movement from the rocks, from the stone tools. What they're focusing on more, like from 8,000 years ago forward, is a lot of technology that involves rocks that are not flint or chert that can be chipped, but rocks that are struck, right? We call it groundstone technology, where they're actually pecking the stone with another stone, a stone that is kind of like the chip stone artifacts that you've been looking at, the spear points. They take a very hard, sharp rock and they can peck rocks that are hard stone, like granite. Well, not granite, they would use other rocks. Granite has silica in it, so when they would peck granite, those little silica bits would fly up in their eye. So they mainly use things that don't have a lot of silica, and they're making axes, full grooved axes like this one. This is a used up axe. This would have been a lot longer, and they could chop down a tree in no time with this. And then they just throw them away when they don't need them and make another one. They have all kinds of pendants. They're using atlatls or throwing sticks that have a stone on them called a banner stone or atlatl weight that is forms a counterbalance when you're holding the weight of the spear out in front is so heavy. If you have a counterbalance on your throwing stick, you can sit there and hold it for a while and you're not having to use a lot of muscular effort. This has been proven by the man who taught me how to flint knap when I was a grad student. He published an article in ethnobiology. So that atlatl weights, or sometimes you'll hear people call them banner stones. They form they form them in all these different shapes. Some of them are so beautiful. They're made out of rose quartz and granite and other things. So they're putting a lot of effort into all of this pecked and ground stone. So their spear points and knives are not that glamorous. They're doing a lot more activities other than hunting. And they're also at a time period climatically where it is dry and there are different animals moving into this, what we would call the Prairie Peninsula up in Iowa and Missouri. And in Arkansas, it gets dry too. And it's called the hypsothermal in general. So they start going more into the riverine areas and they focus on shell collecting. And not that they didn't eat shell earlier, it's just that their focus is more in the big river valleys. And there are sites in the hills as well, in the uplands. But the Middle Archaic people are probably not, oriented the same as those before them. And then in the late Archaic, there's full-blown domestication. We've got people going into the Ozarks making, sometimes these are called hominy holes, these holes in rocks, and they're actually processing nuts and seeds and all kinds of plants that they can utilize. Uh, Not every year is a good year. And so if there's a bad year and there's not a lot of deer available for whatever reason, maybe the nut mast from the nut trees is not abundant. They're going to have to rely on other plants. And that is why the starchy and oily seed complex became so vital. So what that is, I'm going to move on, is a bunch of seeds that are so nutritious that they were fine without a year that was abundant with, say, hickory nuts and pecan and butternut and all of your acorns. So if there was a bad year and they could survive on these sumpweed, sunflower, chenopodium, these are the oily ones. And then you can see the trajectory from these little seeds that are wild to the big uh, domesticated seed. So these are domesticates on the right side, and this is what a scanning electron microscope photo looks like of chenopod, one of the most important nutritious seeds in their whole garden complex. These are, together, all these are called the Eastern Agricultural Complex. The squash, the gourd, the um, sumpweed, the sunflower, chenopod. Sometimes you'll hear lamb's quarters or um, also amaranth. In South America, it's called quinoa. That's kind of a cousin. So two others that grow at the same time are maygrass and knotweed. They're in all these disturbed habitats growing. And these are also scanning electron microscope photographs of those plants. So you can see the seed. What they're going for is the seed coat to be a little thinner, right? So they're going to select certain seeds that are going to propagate better. They're going to give them bigger seeds the next year. This is little barley, another nutritious seed. So this is what their gardens would have looked like 3,000 years ago, filled with all these plants. And this was long before maize was ever developed. So this, people sometimes don't realize that this is the one of the most important centers of domestication in the entire world. Northeast Arkansas, Southeast Missouri, Western Kentucky, Western Tennessee, Northwest Mississippi, and Northeast Louisiana even. As you go farther south, though, you know, people didn't need to rely on plants as much. Of course, women are probably doing most of the domestication, we assume, because every time we study hunter-gatherers that end up becoming more reliant on plants, it's the women that more often are the gatherers of the plant remains. We don't have a lot of evidence for early and middle woodland in this region. Now you do down at in central Arkansas. You've got a site that just grew as a center, Plum Bayou, and by 900, that was an extremely important late woodland, almost a Mississippian site, but it's a different culture. The people down in central Arkansas are vastly different from the culture that lives in northeast Arkansas. These are some of the early woodland sites. I'm going to kind of skip over this because I want to show you some of the innovations. So instead of grooving their woodworking tools, these people were genius. They hafted these in a different manner. They just took a big tree branch and put an oval hole in the tree branch, and this is a self-hafting wood chopping tool. It's called a celt. And so that was a major innovation for this particular culture. And by the way, these people are all over the mid-continent. Their most famous sites are in Helena, Arkansas, Scioto, Ohio, Indiana, Illinois. These people are about 500 years before Christ, before zero. They're exploring caves, intensively exploring caves and gathering minerals and pigments out of caves. They're making cave art. I'm going to skip over the map. These are some of the spear points of their descendants. So those people that were making the big lobed shaped, I'm going to go back so you can see. So this is that characteristic sort of lobed shaped, we call them contracting stem points. They are then deciding, oh, we want to notch our points, right? So they just decide to start notching them. And this culture is one of the most fluorescent cultures in terms of art and religion. And it's been well studied by many, many generations of archaeologists. One of the names that gets attributed to this time period is called Hopewell. And they refer to the Hopewell interaction sphere as a time of incredible long distance trade of many different kinds of materials that are considered extremely special because of where they come from and the power that they may have within them. Shell from both the Atlantic and the Gulf Coast. Special kinds of rocks that are certain colors. Copper from the Great Lakes. This is a type of very translucent flint from one area in North Dakota. It's called the Knife River Flint Quarries. It's actually a historic landmark. Yellowstone has, and parts of Idaho and also Montana have obsidian, and that obsidian gets traded and moved around at this time. So this is an extremely connected time period. In the late woodland, we know that there's a population boom. And how do we know that? Because instead of just a few sites with those characteristic spear points, we have an abundance of sites. It's just almost astronomical, the difference between the number of middle woodland and the number of late woodland sites. And then the next time period, which I wanted to kind of highlight this because of my interest in this time period. Mississippian in general is around AD 700 or so up till the time when Europeans arrive. And so this is a just a cartoon of the chronology of that time period and the different types of spear points. What happens in the early Mississippian and why it's different from the woodland, the late woodland period, is people are now intensively growing corn. They're growing maize. Corn is an English term that's used to describe any grain. So oats, rye, barley. Maize is the more proper term for the crop teosinte that the Native Americans are growing at this time. Early maize bypasses Northeast Arkansas. It goes up and over. We don't have really early maize intensification here. It's much later in time because they have this whole garden of stuff that they're growing, and they've also got the best hunting grounds for not only mammals, but also all of your different waterfowl and migratory birds. This is one of the four flyways, North American flyways, and why it makes such a great place for hunting and fishing today. So these people are organizing themselves on the best farm ground in the entire delta. And if you look closely, you can see these the green and the purple are those desirable soils. And this is where the farmers today want to farm. These are the most arable, farmable, productive lands. This is where those sites are located. When you get to looking at what's been excavated at this time, there's not that many excavated sites that have yielded a lot of information to reconstruct how people were living, but there's a few. And so we have a lot of students that have helped us with not only excavating these sites, but also right now I've got pre-vet students because Arkansas State University has just dedicated yesterday their veterinary school building, and they'll be opening next fall. So we have a lot of students that are interested in getting acquainted with animal bone fragments. So we've excavated lots of these villages and exhumed pit after pit after pit, which are basically trash disposal areas of animal remains. So we can reconstruct their diet and also the environment from what's in these big pits. Um, Most of these sites are dating to only that early Mississippian time period. So we don't have a lot of problem with contamination from other cultures. Um, that's often a problem when you're in the uplands. These are some of the tools that are that they've innovated. So they have a what's called an arrow point, right? And then these are harpoons. They're actually using these for spear fishing, we think. They can also use points, chipped stone points made out of flint or chert to spearfish. This is an awl. This is a weaving tool. This is another weaving tool. It would have been suspended from a woman's belt. This is a hairpin, probably. So there's a lot of, that's a broken awl. The top part, this part, made out of a deer elbow, broke off. And so there's a lot of breakage and people throw their tools away. This is the first site I ever excavated in Arkansas. It's very close to my heart. It's called Buffalo Head Slough. And just north of this is the Sloan site that I showed you pictures of earlier that the Dalton people favored. This site was accidentally land leveled. And so we went in, and all these flags represent these little dots on this map to the left. This is what each one of those little dots represents: a big trash pit, or it could be a single post hole. We were able to completely excavate this whole site. What's very interesting about this site to me is this structure. So this is a pipeline from there down to here. Okay, so we don't have the whole little structure, this round structure. We only have part of it, but we know it's from the same time period as this village. And what's interesting about it is it's round, and all the other houses are actually square. So what is this? Well, there's information in the ethnographic record, ethnohistoric record about women sometimes secluding themselves away from the village when it was their moon time, when they're menstruating. It could be a corn watcher's crib. Maybe this is their field out here, and that's where somebody would be watching the corn for animals to then dispatch an animal. One of the great things about maize is you can leave maize standing and it attracts animals towards your village, right? And then you can dispatch the animals and have meat in your diet. The other thing about this structure is that it could be a shaman's hut, something like that. We just don't know. There are other structures like that in the Mississippian period in Northeast Arkansas at a couple of other sites. So it's just an interesting thing to me and something that may reflect spirituality. This site produced this kind of pottery. It's called Varney, and these are this little arrow points. There's a clay bead. This is another clay bead. They made all kinds of things. This is a village, so there's not a lot of information about how people buried their dead. It's not that kind of site. It's a village site. We don't know where their cemetery would have been. It may have been somewhere that's already been land leveled. It could have been where the road, the highway is today. This is a map of Bruce Cat, the one that is at the northernmost portion of my area. So way up, not far from the Missouri line, like half a mile south of the Missouri-Arkansas border. And this is what one of those trash pits look like. They are a gold mine of information about what people were eating, what the environment was like. And we're, like I said, going through all of the soil that we excavated from each one of these pits to learn about not only the people, but also the environment. In the middle Mississippian, moving up to about AD 1200, you get a little bit more pattern of people, more villages that we know about. There's not as many early Mississippian villages that we know about versus middle so far. And one of the things we know about the early to middle period is that they are very tied to farming. So this is a figurine. It's not from Arkansas, but we have some like this from Arkansas. This one, an archaeologist named Guy Prentice published an article in Mid-Continental Journal of Archaeology, and that study opened up an entire world for me of how important farming and fertility and women were in this society. This is a snake. You can't see his head. It's around the corner there. These are squash or gourd, and there's blossoms as well, and they're going up her back. This broke and it was refitted. They found this up in the east side of the Mississippi River when they were doing archaeology in the American Bottom. We know how these people are farming, specifically the tools they're using, because of this figurine. She's hoeing the snake, which is an underworld creature, and she's using a agricultural implement like this, and how they hafted that is on one of the best handles you can use is from hop hornbeam, because it makes a number 7, right? And that angle is a really good angle to break the earth, and also to make Dalton canoes. This is another site. It wasn't as well land leveled. All the farmers in Northeast Arkansas that have worked with me, I can't tell you how many of them have been so cooperative and have come to say, do you want to excavate before I level? And how do you want it leveled? That we've done this in a way so that we can maximize the information that has come out of the archaeological record. This site, unfortunately, has multiple occupations, and so there's a lot of overlap. But this is some of the material culture from that time period. This is all Middle Mississippian. So these are different kinds of arrow points. These things are curiosities for archaeologists. We don't know what they're for. They may be weaving tools. They could be for spindle whirl production of some kind of cordage. They could be gaming pieces. They could be both. They could be bottle stoppers. That's one of my ideas. They could have been using lamps with bear oil, and this is the little wick that comes out of there. But you can see just fragments of the tops of their pots. It's very plain. This is a weaving tool, most likely, and some more bone tools. Just a really fascinating time period because they're growing maize by this time, but they're also still using the starchy and oily seed plants. So this was the best excavated site that, to my wanting to know what their community layout was like. So we didn't really have a large community in the early Mississippian and Buffalo Head Slough, nor at any of the other sites that Dr. Morse excavated. But at this site, by 1275, so you're almost up to 1380, 1300, you get this amazing layout of houses where they're rebuilding the houses over and over again in the same spot. All these little tiny lines that are single lines, they're just walls. We didn't get like the whole house. So this site was unfortunately not very deeply buried. And when they took the plow layer off, this is what we saw. But we were able to take just the plow layer off and map it, and then we took a little bit, few more inches, and then a few more inches. Each time we had it leveled, we made another map. And so Tim Mulvihill, our map expert who ran the transit and made all these maps for us over the years, he produced this from all the different land levelings that were accomplished at this site. These round things are all the features that had lots of plant and animal remains in them. And then we were able to get quite a few houses excavated. And there are also burials. This was one of the cemetery areas at this site. Unfortunately, the burials were not very well preserved. We didn't excavate them. We left them in place, covered them over, and did not disturb them. So that pottery from the early to middle Mississippian period up till about 1300 looks like this. This is just a drawing I made a long time ago. Their houses, we used to think this is the way they did it. It's called wattle and daub, but I don't think that's how they built their houses now. We have a different idea about how they would have constructed their walls. But this is what Dr. Morse, this is a historic photograph of the Johnny Wilson site, which is one of those middle Mississippian sites in the Delta, the Western lowlands specifically. Some of the things from the Jarrett site with those rebuilt houses include some innovations in pottery. This one has a little bird's foot on it, so we know that these folks are very tightly connected with people in Southeast Missouri. And some of the same pottery motifs show up there. These are some of their stone tools. This is a piece of antler that they would have used for something. This is a little chisel for woodworking and another woodworking tool. This is a piece of, you're going to see more and more of this if you come in and volunteer in my lab. We're washing up a lot of this fired clay from walls and from the smoke hole of their house that they used to ensure the embers from the fire in the central portion of their homes didn't catch the roof on fire. These houses were very easy to catch on fire. And then more of those discs. Some of them don't have a perforation in them. These are different pottery fragments. Most of them are rims, but we also have funnels. A funnel, we don't know exactly what they're using them for. Dr. Morse thought they were maybe processing lotus to get ashes, burning it, and then leaching it, maybe for hominy production. About 1000 AD, you start getting these kind of squash, but they're not from around here. They're from Mexico. It's still cucurbita, though. So their diet is very reliant on meat and plants, and they have very specific times when they collect things. Mollusks are important too, the mussel shells. This is a European ink drawing showing a Europeanized view of one of their villages. They always kept natural areas wild around their villages so that the deer, the raccoons, all the animals of the woodlands, the forest would be there. These are those sites I've just shown you. So you understand kind of where, they're located. This is the Western Lowlands where I focused a lot of my research the first 20 years I was here. We also excavated sites on the other side of Crowley's Ridge. The figure on the right is one of these stone. They're all turned into pipes. I don't know about this one, but oftentimes these are pipes. They could be sculptures and not pipes, but what they are, they're very large. You can see this is in centimeters. This is another one of these. I think it's a fertility figure. It's obviously a woman. And she's got a basket. She's up the backside of her. I don't have a picture to show you. She's got two sunflowers on her shoulders, and the sunflowers face the sky. And then these, I think, other people might have other ideas, are maize stalks. So that's just the Berger figurine for comparison. And then this is very famous. This is Big Boy, as he's known to many archaeologists, and also collectors are very fond of these items because they tell stories that allow us to understand better how people thought about what their duties were, what their purpose was on this earthly plane. You can see he has a little sort of face. That's one place where that occurs. There's many others. It also occurs in a on burials. People will have little, they call them God masks on their ears. And there's one very famous site in Arkansas called Ship's Ferry that was excavated by the Arkansas Archaeological Society, where there was a burial that had two little God masks made out of shell on his earlobes or her earlobes. I don't know if it was a male or a female. So, of course, they're making canoes. They're connected across this entire region with each other. What's of great concern to me is this group up here and how early they come down into this area, because these people are using certain tools that we don't see them in the middle Mississippian until the late Mississippian, and then we have these things, these end scrapers that boom, all of a sudden they're all over. So I don't know if these little scraping tools, which they're presumably using for hide scraping, bison hides up north, and then maybe deer hides as well, and they're coming down through an already populated area, or if there's actual people intermarrying and bringing those tools with them. So that's one of the areas of research I'm extremely interested in. Here's those little god masks and where they were located. This is a picture from an article by Hester Davis, the first state archaeologist of Arkansas. And his name is He Who Wears Human Heads as Earrings. This is just one of the shells that show a motif called Birdman. Might be a symbol of a sodality or a group of people that cross-cuts kinship lines, right? So maybe a military society. And then this is a diagram that shows the multiple layers of the indigenous peoples of the Mississippi valleys view. They have an underworld, they have the middle world, and then they have the upper world, and there's symbols associated with each of those worlds, and those symbols occur in many different media. They occur on copper, repoussé, copper items, headdress elements, shell, also on ceramics. This is just a picture showing some of those things. These are ear ornaments, and they're probably pretty late, unlike the little god mask that was probably earlier. These are shell masks that occur in burials. This is earbobs made out of fluorite. So we can trace all of these materials to a specific source, which is what we want to be able to do, is understand what groups of people are interacting with what other groups of people. And one of the genius, I would call him, researchers, Dr. George Langford, figured out that these items that we generally call gorgets, that are found sometimes on the chest or in other contexts as well, in burials, they're actually probably functioning like a family crest. And so by studying those, you can look at connections across the whole southeastern and midwestern United States. Other elements of their religion, this is the Birdman theme. These are copper recipe plates that were found up in Missouri. This is just 3 of them. There was a large cache of them found. These are things that probably relate to an elite culture, an elite part of the culture, a status, high status group. But this is the general area where all of this material culture in the middle and late Mississippian occurs. Of course, the late Mississippian is when DeSoto encounters in 1541 many groups from Florida all the way through the southeast and into Arkansas. And that's one of the time periods that I'm extremely interested in because of a site we excavated up here in the White River Valley. So what you see from middle to late in terms of settlement is everybody decides, because there's a big earthquake in 1400, I think everybody decides to go over here to where the big rivers are, the St. Francis and the Mississippi. There's a depopulation in this area. We know there's some sites, but they're represented usually by just arrow points or small villages. We don't have a lot of big villages in the western lowlands. They're all in the eastern lowlands. This yellow area right here is Crowley's Ridge, just so you know. And this is the White River Valley. So people have moved over here to where the big rivers are, and they've moved up into the Ozarks. And so all along the Ozark Escarpment, we have along the Little Red and along the White River, we have major late Mississippian settlements. So they're completely invested in agriculture, and I'm going to focus on the Greenbrier site for the last few minutes. The pottery from the Greenbrier site is very specific to its region of the White River Valley. So it's not what you would see at like the Parkin site the Archaeological State Park. It's not like what you would see over at Wilson at that state park. It's very different. These are black and white images from Judge Lemley, a man who bought a lot of artifacts from people that were collecting them, digging them up. There are indications in the collections that are private and at the Gilcrease that there is a Caddo influence. So the Caddo people are in the all up and down the middle to western Arkansas River in Arkansas and into Oklahoma. Their pottery is very different, but you see kind of a hybrid of Caddo and Mississippian influences in the Greenbrier area and also in central Arkansas as well, in the Little Red River as well. This is a picture, it's also almost historic, not quite. In 20 years it will be. This was 1999 at the Greenbrier site up on the White River, just west of Batesville. These are photographs showing us digging little holes to see if we can find deposits that are worthy of excavating. This is a society training program. The Arkansas Archaeological Society decided they wanted to go to this site, and they asked me if they could do the training program there. These buildings are still standing. They're historic. They're the old, they were part of an old school in Batesville. We inhabited those. We made a lab in the school. It was 99, 98, 99, and 2000. We excavated 4 different areas. We found amazing artifacts and indications that there was extremely good preservation at the site. So we went back in 2000 and we excavated what we deemed was a house. So by this time, they're using an arrow point that's called a willow leaf. And we knew the site was, this is a bear tooth, that's an earplug, and that's a raccoon mandible. Good faunal preservation at this site. We thought there was an occupation between 1400 and 1600, but we didn't have any really precise dates. You can't get a really good date from a house post. These are house posts. We know now that, and these are all house posts, these 4. This is one corner of the house. That's the northeast corner of the house. You're looking south. That arrow is pointing north. We know now you have to date only a seed or a nutshell fragment to get a really good radiocarbon date. In 2020, when the pandemic was going on, we decided to go out in the field and start doing gradiometry. Dr. Jamie Lockhart had these 3 squares completed with me in December of 2020. This is that excavated area you just saw in the previous slide. So this house is completely excavated while we're doing this gradiometry. It's just a machine that rolls across the ground, and then it is sensing where there's disturbances. So anywhere somebody dug a hole is going to show up. Even if somebody had gone to the site and looted and dug a big hole to expose a burial, those would be also revealed in this. So you're just seeing sort of our planning of the gradiometry. So we did a little bit. We found this amazing wall or ditch. We don't know what it is yet, but we're going to be exploring that next year. And then also, we found there was this quiet area. It's a plaza. And we know that people had plazas during the middle and late Mississippian period in Arkansas. So the plaza, this is when we had a little bit more of the gradiometry completed, and I wrote a grant. This is where I wanted to put some trenching so we could get a clue as to how they were actually building these ditches and or walls. Um, and then these are houses we wanted to explore during that grant period, but the grant was not funded. This is, of course, the house one that we excavated. And then uh, the ceremony that they hold would have been something that might have happened at the Greenbrier site. The green corn ceremony is a ceremony they have before the corn is picked and ripened. If you look closely at the entire image that we did so far, it's about 8.5 acres of a 30-acre site. We have at least 123 structures. Not all of those are necessarily dwellings. Some of them could be storage houses. Some of them could be corn cribs. This is some just photographs of us excavating the site. This is the owner of the site on the right, Mary Vandiver. She and her brother, Robert Stroud, own the site, and their family uh, are very interested in learning about what's going on there through time. The late Mississippian occupation is not the only occupation there. This is probably it could be a stratified site, but we're only through the late Mississippian component at this one semi-subterranean house, and then this June we excavated another house. This is one of my pre-vet students. She'll be back next year, Bobby Ward, who helped us. We had help from literally dozens and dozens of local residents in the Batesville area, Independence County and other counties, many ASU students. This is where you can kind of see the house floor right here, sort of, but this is not completely excavated. This was taken, a year ago. So we have done more there since and filled it in, and we're already excavating house two. We'll go back next year and finish what we started on house two and keep going from there at this one site. It's kind of like I look at it as my um, sort of like a laboratory away from Arkansas State University, where we have a lab as well, but this is kind of like the lab in the field where we're learning more and more about this time period and the people there. We know the house dates to 1541 now because we precisely dated the house floor and layers above the house floor. So that's where I wanted to end, and if you have questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Dr. Morrow. That was fascinating. You have some comments thanking you for your talk, but I don't see any questions. I'll just ask quickly if anyone is interested in volunteering in your lab or otherwise getting involved with your survey station. What do they do? How do they get in touch with you?
Just Google Arkansas Archaeological Survey, and let's see, I can probably put it up on the screen. Let me escape this. I don't know if I can escape from here. I think I have to go down here to end show. So, you would just go to Arkansas Archaeological Survey, and it's got a section. Well, I don't think it's going to let me do it. It has a section on research stations. So you're just going to go to research stations, and then my station is northeast, and you would just contact us that way through my email, or you could call. The survey's website is pretty easy to navigate. And then also, we have a chapter of the Arkansas Archaeological Society here that meets. In fact, our meeting is tomorrow night. We're going to have the station archaeologist that's at Plum Bayou Research Station come and talk about some of the work they did in June at the training program they held for Arkansas Archaeological Society members. Being a member of the society is so wonderful because it gives people a sense of what real archaeology is. It's not collecting treasure, it's not buying and selling arrowheads or anything like that. It's actually participating in a professionally controlled excavation that allows us to maximize the information that we are actually destroying as we excavate. So we're teaching people how we record things, how we document and preserve the information that's coming out of the ground as we're excavating and sampling. So that the website is the best place to learn about both the society and the survey. And that's how
Wonderful.
they can get in touch with me. Hmm.
Okay, well, thank you so much, and thank you everyone for watching, and we will see you next month. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Rachel. Bye.